Our next speaker, if her first university degree was a person, that person would be in school when I was born. That is some perspective of time. She's an internationally recognized expert in agile development and the change process. She has been teaching at university. She has industry experience from telecommunications and avionics and more. She has 5 books in her bookshelf, well, probably more, but 5 that she wrote. One of them being Fearless Change, Patterns for Introducing New Behaviors. Please introduce Linda Rising.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me. It's so nice to be outside the United States right now. So these are very boring slides. Isn't it wonderful to have these creative people who not only get up in front and give a talk, but they put together the most amazing presentations. So mine are extremely boring, and that is intentional because I give them away. There's no copyright. There's anything I care about, whether you steal any of this information or you want to give this presentation if you think it's worthwhile. So you have my contact information on the very first page. Please send me some email if you'd like to have the PowerPoint, not just a PDF. I will send you the PowerPoint, and then you can talk about magic. So do you believe? Do you believe in magic? A show of hands, perhaps. Do you believe in magic? Yeah. Well, I'll try it again. No? Okay. We have accumulated believers. All I had to do was back up and start over again. And now you believe. Now you believe. That's important. Well, sorry. Although I wish I did. It's like religion. I wish I were religious. People who are religious live longer. But I don't. Although in the last couple of months, I wished I could make someone in the White House disappear. Boom! Gone! I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. So even though I don't believe in magic, every now and then I do run across what I would have to call some kinds of magic things in how people work together, how we think. And the very first example that I have of that is a magic number that I saw a long time ago. It's actually a combination of numbers, 7 plus or minus 2. How many of you have seen that magic number? Yeah, when I taught in university, I used to make my students in the software engineering class read this classic paper. It's by a fellow named George Miller. And he was the first one to observe that there are cognitive limits. And he was applying them to software development, but that's for people who do anything. You have a limit on all kinds of things you can think about, things you can do, 7 plus or minus 2. And then when I went back to work on a PhD and I was doing research on software design, I kept running into the number 6, which does fit 7 plus or minus 2. And when I saw things where there were more than 6 of any number of the elements of a program, I knew there was going to be trouble. We just don't do well. Our brains have all kinds of limits, depending upon what we're trying to do. And you could say, in a way, those are almost like magic, that somehow that number 6, or 7 plus or minus 2, seems like, well, where did it come from? And who discovered that? And what is the evidence for it? And what can we do about it? So the next number I stumbled across was the number 10. I was a research person working in a software development organization, and we were just starting to do agile. And this was a company that produced enormous amounts of large software. And of course, to do that, they had to have large teams. So when we decided we would do Scrum, my manager said, we might need to think about this. And his question was, how big should a team be? So I said, I don't know, but I will do a little research and talk to some friends of mine who have studied this. And so after doing that, we wrote a pattern. How many of you are familiar with patterns? Maybe I should back up. Okay. How many of you are familiar with patterns? Oh, it's magic. It's magic. Did you see that? Yeah, so we wrote a pattern that was called No More Than 10. Had actually based that on some research done by a good friend of mine at Bell Labs who was named Jim Copleen. And he had already written a pattern, but I didn't really like it. I didn't like the name. I didn't like the pattern. I didn't think it was well written. I thought I could do a better job, especially if I had some help from friends. So my pattern was called No More Than 10. His was called Size the Organization, and it was from a collection of organizational patterns. And in it, I had the result of a lot of other experts. One of them was Alistair Cockburn. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. Alistair, well, let's try that again. Okay, how many of you have heard of Alistair? Look at that. It's Alistair Cockburn, and he said, separating workers into smaller clusters calls for your architects to partition the system. Ooh, wait, this is another talk. That the structure of the system and the structure of the organization map, a topological mapping. They are mirror images of each other. Once you've decided one, you have decided the other. Anybody know what that's called? Conway's Law, yes. So they're not separate decisions. Okay. Have your architects partition the system so that teams of 3 to 5 can behave exactly as that on a small project. Fred Brooks. Wow, okay. Fred Brooks. Oh. Fred Brooks. Oh. Okay, what did Fred Brooks do? Who is this guy? People are going to think I paid you. The Mythical Man Month. He's no longer with us. But if you haven't read the Mythical Man Month, okay. Fred Brooks said, the ideal is the small, sharp team which by common consensus shouldn't exceed 10 people. So I had the benefit of a lot of experts who had seen a lot of development, and they supported my no more than 10 pattern. And then I began doing a lot of retrospectives, and I'm not going to read all these to you, but these were comments from retrospectives of real projects. You're going to ask for the slides anyway, and so you'll have all these comments. They agreed with me. They said in some way or another, yeah, that no more than 10, that really does kind of fit what I've seen. Now, that's fine. But that, in a nutshell, is the problem with software development, is there's no science there. It's just opinion. I talked to somebody and that person had experience and that person seemed to agree with me, or this person has success, they made a lot of money, so I should pay attention to them, or this team over here seemed to do really well, so let's watch and see if we can learn from that. But nobody is doing anything that's even closely resembling science. So patterns don't have any science in them either. And at that time, well, that was the best we had. And then I was lucky enough to run across a guy named Robin Dunbar, who, by the way, is still alive. Robin Dunbar. Ooh, that's pretty good, actually. Let's try this. Robin Dunbar. Even better. He's an evolutionary biologist. That means his science looks at the way people have evolved to exhibit certain characteristics. So his science is really biology, anthropology, maybe a little bit of social psychology. Yeah, it's social science, but at least it is still science. And he's most famous for another magic number. It's called Dunbar's number, appropriately enough, and that's 150. So in addition to that 10, 7 plus or minus 2, 6 numbers, here's another one for you. And here's a diagram of his numbers. We're not going to talk about all of them, but if you'd like to read more about those numbers, I recommend his latest book, which is called Friends. And in looking at all of those numbers, we're going to pay attention to, well, 10 kind of fits in his little circle of 15. He does say there are limits, and these are cognitive limits for some reason that we have evolved to behave a certain way around a certain number of people. So now notice for the rest of the conference, when you see a group of people talking, count how many people are in that group. So I was doing that during the break. We don't do well talking to more than a certain number of people, whether we're talking kind of one-on-one or if there's a group of people, how big can that group be? Start to take notes. See if you can uncover Dunbar's number and other numbers. How many people can laugh together? There's a limit. And it's a human limit. It's a cognitive human limit. It's a limit imposed by your brain. You can't handle it. And that directly applies to how you work in a group. So what I remember before my boss came in and asked me, how big should a team be, is, well, first of all, you've already noticed that I'm incredibly old. That was part of the introduction, wasn't it? That I'm incredibly old. Yeah, and he started out by saying, you're in your 50s? Is that what you said? Okay. My daughter is in her 50s. And I had her late in life. So I have a birthday coming up on St. Patrick's Day. So think of me on St. Patrick's Day, okay, when I will be 83. Thank you. We will hope I make it. St. Patrick's Day is not that far away. So I've been working for a long time. And what I remember is nobody ever asked that question. Nobody ever thought about that question. How big should a team be? As though there were an answer. as though there were a way of saying, ideally, because we have cognitive human limits, ideally there would be how big an answer to that question. Nobody thought about it. Nobody cared. In fact, as I remember, everyone felt more is better. So if we have a big project that we anticipate is going to take a long time, then we'd better have a lot of people. In fact, the more people, the better. How many of you are old enough to remember that? Anybody? Wait, let's try this. Okay. How many of you are old enough to remember? Oh, yes, yes. Nobody ever thought that perhaps there might be some science, a reason for deciding how many people we should put on a team. Nobody ever addressed that question. Nobody really seemed to care. I think that's one of the things, just one of the things that Agile brought to the table. And that includes, especially in the United States, the notion of overtime. How many of you ever worked overtime? Oh, I didn't even have to go around and say it. Yeah, I can remember one project in particular where we started working overtime from day one. And that was the year that had no vacations. That was the year that had no weekends, no holidays, no Christmas. We were working all the time. To this day, I cannot eat pizza. At 6 o'clock, a manager would go around and say, "Are you staying? We're getting ready to order pizza." You thought, well, I'm almost done. Okay, I'll stay. Okay, I'll order pizza. And of course, it was always cold. How much cold pizza? Wow. That was the way it was. And everyone thought, that's how you do it. No one even ventured to think that perhaps, this might not be a good idea. So after I saw Robin Dunbar's numbers and I realized there's science here, then I started as a consultant to be a little more aware of what I was seeing. Just like now you'll be a little more aware and you're going to watch how people have conversations out in the hallway, that there are limits, there are natural limits. And one of them is Robin Dunbar's number of 150. Now, the people that I talk to many times are startups. They start with a small group of people, and they're so happy. And maybe they're working remotely, maybe they're not, but they are so happy. And they feel they have found magic. Our little company, we are doing so well. We all love each other. We are so happy. And then they start to grow. And they get bigger and bigger. And if they are really successful, they get even bigger. And then something happens. Right around that magic number of 150. Right before the pandemic, I was working with a team in Greece, and they had just hit 150, and they said, something is wrong. We used to be so happy. And now I don't even know who the new people are. I don't recognize them. We don't have enough room. We have to have another floor of our building. That, by the way, is a red flag. If your team is so big that now you don't have enough room on a floor, you need another floor of the building. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. So I said, well, you know, there's real science here. We could talk about this. That number 150, it seems like a magic thing, but it is real. That when we hit 150, things just fall apart. You better intentionally make a decision to split. Put some people over here and some people over here, and that's just the way it's going to be. But if you don't do that and you try to make it work with more than 150, what you're going to get is chaos. Oh man, we're back to the White House again. Jeez. Yeah, it's not a good thing. And all of a sudden, that feeling that they had, that love, it's all gone. So Robin Dunbar has said there's all kinds of evidence that people knew even before they were studying anthropology that number 150, you just stumble over it across ancient history, more recent history. There's even a group that lives together communally, a religious group called the Hutterites, and they have known for a long time that 150 was not good. And when they would approach that, they deliberately divided the group in half, and they said, you people go there, and we will stay here, and we will start again with 2 new groups. Because we can't go beyond that number 150. It's magic. Now, I know you're probably thinking, well, okay, but online. Oh, sure, online, everything is still without limit. You can have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Facebook friends. You can have connections with people all over the world. But remember, this limit, all these numbers, they're cognitive limits. You're still working with the same brain. So all the research since, and the one I quote here is from Wolfram's look at thousands and thousands and thousands of people who are using various forms of social media. And what he finds is you can still see all of Dunbar's numbers. Yes, you might think you have 5,000 friends, but they're not really your friends. You really have this little small core of 2 or 3, and then you have 10 to 15, and then you have, and yeah, the limits are still there. Because there are limits on what you can do. Your brain hasn't evolved to deal with all of that. In fact, that's true for so much of what we carry around with us today. So the most famous example is a company in Arizona where I used to live a long time ago. It's a company called Gore. They make Gore-Tex. How many of you know about, oh, look at that. Of course, it's Sweden and it rains all the time. And yes, all right, so sure, yeah. And the company was started by an amazing individual named Bill Gore. And in the beginning, it was like the startups. Everybody was happy, and things were going well, and his company was making money. And then one day he walked into his factory and he said, it doesn't feel right. What an intuitive guy he must have been, because they had just hit 150. He said, I've got to do something about this. So he actually made it company policy. As soon as a part of the company reaches 150, he divides it 50-50. Half goes in one direction, half goes in another. They are in different buildings, they use different parking lots, they have different capabilities, different functionality. Boom, and we start over. So I've read a lot about Bill Gore. He was an amazing guy. His company is still successful even though he's not around. And we want to be sure that we do one thing before we go forward, which is to say magic is good. Those numbers, yes, we should pay attention, but as we used to say when I was a mathematician, necessary, but not sufficient. It's not just that you have a team size limit of 10. It's not that you have this limit on the size of the organization of 150. You've also got to have a worthwhile organization that stands on its own values and principles. And so I would let you have a look at what Gore says on their website, that they believe in fairness, freedom, making commitments, consulting with others before making a serious decision. So it's a wonderful company anyway. And this size thing, yeah, good to pay attention to. Good to pay attention to, but not enough. So what can you do? You can remember Dunbar's numbers. Remember there is science. Watch the sizes of your teams. Watch the sizes of your departments. Watch the sizes of your organizations, because sometimes something like that will have an enormous impact that you may not have appreciated until now, when you know it does make a difference. So let's just do one more thing. Whenever you form a team and you say, no more than 10, well, we'll have to put some other people somewhere else. Oh, our organization is starting to get to 150. Linda said that's bad. We better separate and put some people over there and some people over here. As soon as you do that, now there's a serious, serious downside. Because now I'm over here and you're over there. Oh, but we're all working for the same company, aren't we? Oh, we're all friends, aren't we? We all love each other, don't we? No, we don't. If you're on another team and I'm over here, then I call you them, and I call us we. We do this. This is ours. Those people, them, they do something else, and they are not us. Is that a serious problem? How many of you think I don't even have to go around the circle for that one. So let's look at some science. Very famous science, classic science. There's a replication crisis in science where now they're looking at some results that occurred maybe 6 months ago or 2 years ago and finding, well, we can't replicate that result, so now we're not so sure. Well, this one has been replicated. It's been around a long time, and it has definitely been replicated. It was done by a guy named Henri Tajfel, who survived the Holocaust. And what he saw made him feel, what is it about people? These are not bad people, but they are doing bad things. Could it be that we have something in us that makes us do this, us against them, this tendency to start fighting over trivial things, meaningless things? So he decided he would investigate that from a scientific perspective. And his approach in the beginning was to say, what can we start with as square one? What can we say, oh, well, people are fine now, and now we'll add, say, religion. Well, that would do it, wouldn't it? We would start immediately doing this. Politics, oh, yes, we would start doing this. But surely there is a baseline. Surely there's some minimal magic number. Or we can say, no, people are okay here. We all get along just fine. And what he found, as he tried to get simpler and simpler ways of dividing people up, he found that it takes almost nothing. The most trivial, the most nonsensical, the tiniest, teeniest, ittiest, bittiest thing will divide us. Do I have a quote? Yes. He was horrified. He actually put that in his paper. He was horrified that it takes almost nothing to divide us. So here's his experiment. He brought people into a room, he sat them in front of a computer screen, and he put a lot of dots on the screen, and he said, I want you to estimate. How many dots do you think there are? And when they had finished, he said, there are some people who overestimate the number of dots, and there are others who underestimate the number of dots. You happen to be an overestimator. Well, this is nonsense. How many of you have ever been in a psychology experiment? Yeah, they don't tell you what they're doing. No. So that had nothing to do with dots, and there's no overestimator or underestimator personality. No, it was all made up. So they said, okay, that's the end of this experiment. We're going to do now a continuation, another experiment where we're going to play a game. And in the game, which was, by the way, played with real money, you can, in the course of the game, give money to other people or take money away from other people. Now, they never saw any other people. They were all imaginary people, but they said, oh, by the way, the people you're playing with also did the dot estimation, just for grins. We'll tell you, this guy was an overestimator and he was an underestimator, and, just throwing in that information. And what they found was, if you were an overestimator, you tended to give money to the other overestimators, and you would take away money from the underestimators. You didn't even know these people. And what was overestimating anyway? Nothing. A meaningless exercise. But it was enough to move the participants in a direction to say, no, we overestimators, we take care of each other. We think about each other. We love each other. For what? Counting dots on a screen. Now, that's just one example. He did so many flavors of that, trying vainly to find some baseline that says, no, at this point, we can all get along. So what do you have to worry about? If you're dividing up, if you're looking at teams, if you're saying we have to pay attention to 150, and that means splitting the organization, as soon as you do that, then you're going to have. You will have. It's guaranteed. You're going to have an us versus them. So the company in Greece said, okay, we'll divide up. And they said, we're thinking about getting T-shirts. I said, that's probably the worst thing you can do. Because as soon as you have T-shirts and yours are red and your T-shirts are green, then now we have a real solid basis for a war. I have held retrospectives where we spent half a day on T-shirts. Well, they got T-shirts and we didn't get T-shirts. Or their T-shirts had collars and ours didn't have collars. Theirs were red. We wanted the red T-shirts, but no, we wound up with the green T-shirts. They spent time on T-shirts. It's not for nothing that the military uses uniforms. As soon as you put on that T-shirt, it boosts that us against them. So I said to the team, maybe you should have, and here's some non-numerical magic, a ritual. Some way of bringing people together. Some way of saying, we're going to make a change in the organization. I said, there's a lot of information about rituals. This isn't as strange as it seems. There's actually research that shows people who have rituals in their lives, they perform better. The perfect example is in sports. How many of you follow some sport or another? And how many of you know a player in that sport who does something like wear his socks inside out, or his shirt on backwards, or his cap at an angle, or he wears certain kinds of jewelry, or he does certain motions before he begins his serve? How many of you, yeah, and they always do that. They always do that. One particular sports figure was interviewed about the strange way he tied his shoes. And they said, what would happen if you didn't tie your shoes that way? And he said, I never do. A ritual is something that has meaning. It's something you believe in. It's something you do because you think it does make a difference. So there are research now on research, and it comes from Harvard Business Review, that shows if you go through these strange behaviors, you really do perform better. You feel better. You are better. It made me wonder about agile. There are teams where I visit and they say, our daily stand-ups just aren't working. Or, yeah, we hold our retrospectives, but I don't think we get a whole lot out of them. And then other teams that say, oh, we always do. Our stand-up at the same time. We do it in exactly the same way. And yes, it works for us. So I think maybe for those teams, it's a ritual. It has meaning. And for those teams that are just doing it to check off a box, it's just something they do. It has no meaning. They don't believe in it. And both teams are right. It works or it doesn't work. So the research comes from Harvard Business. Michael Norton was the lead researcher on it. And what he found astounded him. That you can make it up. It doesn't have to have some sort of deep religious significance. You can make it up. You can do whatever you want as long as you say, this is my ritual. This is what I do. In the Harvard experiment, they said, we're going to write about something very disturbing. And then we're going to have one group, the experimental group, tear it up, sprinkle it with salt, count to 10, and then burn it. The other group did nothing. It was a made-up ritual. It's not having deep religious significance. But the ritual group did better. So I wondered, maybe it's belief. Maybe that's the difference in the agile teams that I see where things work, that they believe in it. It's become a ritual. It's sacred. That sports team guy never says, I think I'll put my socks on right side out. No, he never would. He never does. So maybe that's what we need. More rituals, I think. So what can you do? Maybe look for more rituals in your life. Look for a chance to make something work. Or personally, I walk every day. I've given a talk on trees that people seem to have remembered, which I think is interesting. Walking is the best exercise. And now I see some new science. I haven't even told my husband about this. That walking is good for creativity and innovation, not just for being healthy. But while you're walking, you need to do something with your hand. So I bought a magic rock. And while I'm walking, I carry it. It's in my pocket. And while I'm walking, I'm doing something with my fingers. So I keep that part of my brain busy so I can come up with ideas, so I can solve problems that maybe this might work for you. The science says the hand is connected to the other hemisphere. So if you want your right hand to be stimulated, that's creative thoughts, then, okay, left hand, okay, hook to your right hemisphere. So you can experiment. I think you can experiment. And what I've done is I want to give you a chance to do that. So I brought you a present. I know we're going to go to lunch, but on your way, maybe you could take a rock and start your own ritual. What do you think? Yes.